Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Carolyn Dolby, and I am your speechtherapypd.com podcast host for School of Speech. School of Speech is designed for the school-based SLP to come together. We're going to start exploring current trends, share insights, and champion our expertise. Our goal is to bolster confidence, celebrate our triumphs, and foster a community dedicated to the excellence in the school setting. So excited today. Our episode is Navigating Diversity, the Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Student. And we are so excited to have Margaryta Kuzmin with us today. And she's popping there. She is, my friend. She is here to help us navigate our exploration of the unique needs and challenges faced by our culturally and linguistically diverse student population. As we dive into the world of advocacy, I just got lost where I'm doing that. As we dive into our deep look into how we can best serve our students that come from diverse backgrounds, we've got Margaryta to help us with that. I'm going to go with some financial disclosures. I'm going to start with Margaryta. She's employed by the New York City Department of Education, and she is receiving an honorarium from speechtherapypd.com for her participation in today's episode. Non-financial, she is an ASHA member and also the New York Speech and Language and Hearing Association as well, NISHLA. For me, I am salaried as at the district level dysphagia support speech pathologist. I am compensated for my graduate courses that I teach at the University of Houston. I consult with school districts across the nation, supporting their program development and staff training. And I also receive compensation from speechtherapypd.com for hosting School of Speech. Non-financial for myself, I am a member of Texas Speech and Hearing Feeding and Swallowing Task Force. I volunteer for Feeding Matters, and I'm also a member of ASHA's Special Interest Groups 13, Swallowing and Swallowing Disorders, as well as 16 school-based issues. Now, without any further ado, let's welcome Margaryta Kuzmin. Hi.
Hi guys, I see so many responses. It's so nice to read what everyone posted. So I'm going over the chat as well. Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
We are so excited to have you. Margaryta is a bilingual pediatric speech language pathologist and a child educator who specializes in feeding and swallowing disorders, as well as augmentative and alternative communication. With over 10 years experience, she has serviced hundreds of linguistically diverse, mild to severely delayed and medically fragile children with various socioeconomic statuses within early intervention and school settings. Margaryta is also an author of a children's book titled Baby Zoo and has contributed to various publications, and she has also received multiple awards throughout her career. Welcome, Margaryta. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Fantastic. So glad to see you. And thank you so much for joining us today. We're so blessed to have you. I know we got a lot to talk about, so I think we should just jump right in. But if you don't mind starting off by walking us through the difference between sequential and simultaneous language learners, that might be a place to start.
Yeah, sure. So before I even start going there, I just want to make sure that everybody knows, obviously, I'm a bilingual speech-language pathologist. I learned English when I was 13 years old, when I came to the United States. So I will use myself as an example. I'm also a mom of 2 bilingual children. So again, just to see how fitting this is as I'm SLP working in the school, but also I myself as a bilingual learner and a mom of 2 kids who are bilingual. So going into the difference, and I'm sure those who had a little bit of education in their grad school and maybe some of the postgraduate coursework, the simultaneous language learners are those who usually will put those who learn 2 languages at the same time, simultaneously. And usually we want to, when we consider that, we would say that they will get those 2 languages before age of 3, right? So for example, for my kids who have been born in the United States, but we have 2 languages that we use in a household, they would be considered simultaneous language learners. As of for myself, a person who learned one language in a different setting and then immigrated into the United States, I'm a sequential bilingual. So I had my skills in one language, and then I immigrated here and had to learn a new language. And so that is a sequential bilingual. And so the only thing I want to make sure is that you guys know the little research inside is that simultaneous learners often develop both languages, like as I said, and usually one is not more dominant than the other. So that's like a balanced bilingual. But sometimes, for example, for my kids, as they're learning, as they're going through school and they're getting a lot of that academic language, one, of course, language is more dominant, which is English for them. And then for sequential language learners, they show that learners initially experience a silent period. And this is important for us to know, is that there was a point in my life when I was in middle school where I just had to observe the language, right? So obviously, if you would test me at that time, I would probably fail at every test that you would give me because I was just going through that process of just absorbing and learning the language. So those are the two things I wanted just for you to keep in mind. That yes, hopefully I use myself as little examples so it's a little bit more clear, especially for those.
I love that. I knew you would be perfect for this episode. I knew it. I know this, comes from the heart. Yeah. So let's get into talking about how I think you started a little bit with language development. Where do we want to go next?
Right. So I feel like the major part for us as SLPs working in the schools, right, is to really understand, well, how do we assess these kids as they become a part of our caseloads, right? So we have a lot of kids immigrating from different countries, and I may not speak that language, right? So actually, when I dig a little bit into research, I find out that only 6% of all SLPs in the United States have the bilingual extension. That's very little for the amount of kids that we get caseloads, right? And 4% of those 6% are the Spanish-speaking bilingual SLPs, which is great that we have them, right? And usually Spanish-speaking kids are the majority of our caseload as well. However, what about the rest of the kids who came from China, who came from other countries, right? So then what do we do with them? Like, how can we assess them, and how can, the most important question, I think, is always to figure out, well, do they actually have a language delay, or they just learn in English, right? So I think that's the big chunk of our issue that we're having within the schools to figure that out. Do we keep them in services, or do we discharge them, right?
Absolutely. So tell us more about, we started getting into the assessment, and that's important to make sure that the difference between a difference and a disorder is so important.
Yeah. So when we look at IDEA, right? So it's important to really notice that assessments and other evaluation, and this is from IDEA, I'm reading verbatim, materials used to assess a child, and I'm going to go to just skip a few sections, are provided and administered in a child's native language or other mode of communication in the form most likely to yield accurate information on what the child knows and can academically, developmentally, and functionally, unless it is clearly not feasible to provide or administer, right? So here we really fall into that where it is by law that we need to provide someone, if possible, of course, if it's feasible, who speaks that child's language. So the first and most, I guess, ethically relevant and appropriate is to find an SLP or a provider that can help you to guide working with this child. And of course, in ideal world, it is very not possible, even in New York City, and we have so many SLPs here with so many different languages, and we still struggle to find those SLPs. So I can't only imagine this issue in other states and other little cities. So obviously this is our first step, is to find, hey, does anyone in our profession is able to help us out, even if it's possibly a Zoom call and you might have some information, any of those things would be great. Now, when that's not possible, what do we do? So so I actually went on ASHA website and wanted to find out, like, what have ASHA been doing? How ASHA has been helping us out? And they created a whole huge section on how to go about assessing bilingual children as a monolingual SLP regarding all languages. And I thought, oh my God, like I have to use this. I have to make sure you guys know it's available. Maybe some of you know that it's available, but those who may not know, please go on ASHA and find it. And they guide you step by step on what you should be doing. And some of the things that they talked about is, of course, administering a very detailed, in-depth interview with a parent. Well, how we're going to do that? It would be great if it would be a parent who speaks English, right? And possibly that was a transfer. Maybe they've been in the country for a few years. Maybe the parent is able to answer your questions. What happens if the parent also doesn't speak that language, right? If doesn't speak English. So the use of interpreter is highly recommended. And as we are trying to solve an issue, a new issue arises, right?
Right.
Where to find an interpreter. So that's something, again, I guess it's based on district and school-wide. I know that we have interpreter services that are available to us. So there's a phone number that we can call and a person on another line can translate to our parents. So that's a great tool that I have in my school for those kids whose language I do not speak. So I use that as one of my tools. I search for anyone in the school that can possibly be the translator. But I also understand that's one of the roadblocks in other schools is to find it. So it's kind of like we're trying to give you tools on how to tackle the issue, but sometimes we just keep on getting more issues by solving this. It's a kind of multifactorial, right? Like the bilingualism.
Right. With what you said at the very beginning, when you said, okay, so ASHA guides us by stating that best practice would be providing that assessment with a native speaker of that language. Okay, that is all fine and good for maybe here in Texas Spanish, but there's a lot of different Spanish dialects that so even saying
within the one category of language that could be the dialects, right? Same thing as Chinese speaking, right? There's Mandarin, there's other stuff. Exactly. So within that, right? So it's a big challenge, and I understand that, and that's why I try to really prepare this for you to actually give you tools that you can use versus constantly give you something that it's another roadblock. And you know what? At the end of the day, when I was preparing for this podcast/course, we have come. Definitely, there's more research out there. There's more support, but I just feel like we still haven't really moved much in the area of bilingualism, and it's probably because it's just so many factors that is involved that we cannot put people in the box and say like this is the way that you do it, because everybody comes from such a different environment and experiences and socioeconomic statuses, and you have to mix all of that into one component, which is you can only do it by individual basis, and that's what it comes to at the end. So I understand about the translation. So you're going to do your best. You're going to try to see if there's anyone in the school that may speak that language, and you're going to do your best to ask a parent about different things that they may think the child may struggle at home, right? And then we would think about, well, what kind of question would I ask mom? Like, what's important questions? So Dr. Crowley, she runs a leaders project at Teachers College, Columbia University. That's where I got my bilingual extension, is with Dr. Crowley, and she is such a pioneer in this field. And she, on her website, the Leaders Project, you guys can search it up. She came up with 8 the most important questions that you must ask a parent, which will help you, right? Which will help you and guide you on figuring out if this is a language delay or it's a language disorder, even if you are monolingual SLP. Okay, and I'm not going to read through all the questions, but some of the things, for example, which were when I was studying with her, sometimes I didn't think that that's the question that I would want to ask. For example, parents' highest level of education. And initially I was like, why does that matter, right? Because actually there's a strong indicator and there's research on likely academic achievement and standardized test performance based on socioeconomic status. So what what we what we see is that exposure to books, for example, or different environments within the home can give us an indicator that this might be just the exposure issue. It's not a language delay. So the child may still appear that he, for example, may look delay or may appear delay, but all it is just exposure, right? So we have to put that into account that maybe the child just didn't have access to books, or maybe the parents haven't read to the child. So that's an important question. Another thing is significant changes in the family structure. And I think this is so important because when I came here at 13 years old, I went to middle school, right? Everything was so new to me. The culture, everything is different. The way that students were dressed was not what I had in my suitcase. So obviously that was a point in my life where I was felt a little lost and felt like I didn't fit in. So obviously you kind of go like inward, right? You just kind of shut down. You feel afraid to speak up, even with the few words that you may possibly learned already, because you feel ashamed on using that language, right? So, but also looking into any divorces or living in a shelter and things like this can significantly impact a child's performance on those tests that you possibly presented from. So there's 8 of them. Please find them. It's going to be a nice guide to you.
Margaryta, sorry, I'm going to stop you a second. Could you give us that reference?
It's called Leaders Project, and it's by Leaders Project, and it's by Dr. Crowley. It's spelled Crowley.
Okay.
And she's done a lot of work. It's actually, I'm also going to reference her on that website, the Leaders Project website. You can use, it's called slam cards. It's basically pictures which she uses to get a sample, a language sample. And then you can also use it as to teach, test, teach, retest. So where you basically create a story based on the picture. So it's already there, the picture's already there, the questions are already there. So that's one of the resources that you can use tomorrow that's available for free. And then I know that she has some videos that are for free, so maybe you need to pay for, but I know a lot of stuff is available for free as a resource. So make sure you check that out. Incredible work.
I just added a website for Leaders Project, and you called those SLAM cards?
SLAM cards, LAM, and I'm sure they stand for something. I just can't recall it right now. I think it's like sample language something, but yeah, I used those before, and I got a language sample. Thank you. Yes, so they are great, and I think Dr. Crowley actually spoke at ASHA past November about the SLAM cards. So I know that following her, you always get like the best resources and the newest research. So she's a big advocate in New York specifically. So that's that. And then also on the same Leaders Project page, there are questions for the teacher to ask, because as we asked our questions and we interviewed the parents, we got the interpreter, for example, and we got our questions answered. We can also, interview a teacher, what the teacher has been noticing, and there are questions that you can ask the teacher. So those are questions available as well.
Margaryta, if I can stop you again, sorry, but Jennifer R., thanks. This is a great question. You indicated that ASHA has some guidelines on, okay, Jennifer was asking, does ASHA have a directory of bilingual SLPs that school SLPs could use, even over Zoom, to help with assessments? Do you know if that was part of that?
Know that exists.
If it doesn't, it would be great if they would.
Yeah, you could definitely use me as a resource in regards to like the research and some laws that require, let's see, like if you don't have an interpreter and you want to address this with administration, there are definitely laws that you can provide and some research saying how beneficial that would be. So you have me as a resource. That's one place, right? That would be great if ASHA would have that. I haven't heard of it, but that would be a great thing to have, where you can have access to some of bilingual SLPs across country, but I don't think such a thing exists. Maybe I should start one.
Hold on, I messed up. There it is. I thought I was doing it to everyone. I just gave my chat just to Margarita, who did not need the reference, so it should now go out to everybody. Leadersproject.com, and I added the slam card. So I think everybody is really interested in that.
So yeah, and then also understanding that, so also when we're learning English, when we're learning, right, for our sakes, we are talking about English, learning English, right? When we're learning a second language, there are two types of languages that we use. The first one is the basic interpersonal communications skills. Those are like, hi, how are you? I'm good. I ate an apple, right? Those basic everyday conversations.
What did you call it? Interpersonal?
It's called BICS, BICS.
Mm-hmm.
Basic interpersonal communication skills. Those skills typically take from 2 to 3 years to acquire. And I remember myself, and I remember I felt confidently having like a normal conversation at about a year and a half of being in the United States. So those were my BICS. Mm-hmm. And then we have CALP, Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency, CALP. And that's the academic language. The academic language, that's the language of the school, right? The different vocabulary that revolves around school-based stuff, right? When we learn about science, that could be like our Saturn and condensation and words like that, right? And everything that has to do with that. So that academic language can take from 5 to 7 years to develop, right? So we cannot have someone in services for 5 to 7 years because we think they're delayed, but all they are is just learning English, right? I think that's the biggest part. We don't want to over diagnose our kids with a language delay when they're just learning English. At the same time, I want to advocate for my kids who have diagnoses or who are definitely struggling. And obviously, for those kids, I want to make sure that they do get the services that they deserve. So it's definitely, it's a tough to be an SLP, especially a monolingual. I can only imagine how hard it could be. But again, we are here to give you some tools. So I want to address you to this amazing article that I found. And it's a recent article, 2022. And I just found it so useful. And I think it's going to be useful for so many SLPs. It truly guides you through the laws, but also the different trends and research that has been done up until that point. And I think it's so important that it put everything together in one article. So it's called Assessing Language Skills in Bilingual Children, Current Trends in Research and Practice. And it's by Max Freeman and Scott Schroeder. It's spelled SCHROEDER. And the article is 2022. It's available for everyone because I was just able to find it on Google. And it really breaks down all the issues that we're having in the schools, all the issues that monolinguals are having in the schools. It talks about the insufficient grad school, right, preparedness for serving children who are bilingual. It talks about different ways to approach assessing, treating, and then progress monitoring those kids. So I really, really encourage you guys to get a hold of that article. It's nicely written. It's like everything is like just put in a nice order. Everything is in its boxes. I just absolutely love it. And what I really loved is how it talked about different types of assessments that we can do, or the options that we have while we're still trying to figure out how to assess those kids. And of course, there's a lot of conversation about dynamic assessment. And a lot of times people heard that word, but they're like, I still don't know what that means, right? Like, what is dynamic assessment? What does that look like? I've never done that. Or for example, I've done it, but I've only done it for a specific kid. And I don't know how to do it for a person who is bilingual. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Dorian, thanks. I think other people might have the same question. Do you mind repeating the BICS and the CALP again? Just go over what they stand for.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Okay. So BICS, and you got that right, BICS, stands for Basic Interpersonal Communication Skills, right? Think about basic skills. That's hi, how are you? I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Did you have any homework? Yes, I did my homework. So basic skills, just like a basic conversation that you typically have between peers, between a teacher and a student. Great. And then the CALP, it's CALP, Cognitive Academic Language Proficiency. So that stands for more advanced understanding of our schooling, what we learn within the school, right? So so for example, if you're in history, you're learning about westward expansion, and you have so many vocabulary in that as you learn that. So that part is called cognitive academic language proficiency. So that's something extra that you'll learn within each of the classrooms, within mathematics, or, whatever. So that the CALP takes from 5 to 7 years. So that's the crazy part, right? So it takes a long time for those bilinguals to really get a hang of it, to be almost like on the same level with the monolinguals, to understand, to be able to really comprehend what we're learning and what those things are. So that's why I want to make sure that you guys have that information, so you will become a little bit more sensitive when you are serving that population, and you can ask that question. Well, it's been only, like, for example, 2 to 3 years. Am I too quick to judge possibly that it's a language delay? Maybe the child is still learning, because I'm asking really high-end questions, and maybe the child is just not ready to answer them. So if you want, I'm not sure where you want this conversation to head on. I wanted to talk a little bit about dynamic assessment, but you guys tell me if you want me to expand on anything else. Like, I want to make sure that I'm also listening to the audience, and any questions you guys have, we could definitely do.
One question: if what you gave us a percentage of how many bilingual SLPs, what was that percentage?
6%. I think it was 6 point something. 6% of all SLPs will have bilingual extension, which is crazy.
Okay, so you're saying that only 6% of speech paths out in America have that bilingual extension, is what you're saying?
That's what I read, and I didn't know how recent that. Out of the people that we have here, we have about 45 participants right now. Can you guys let me know if you have bilingual certification? Just put a yes if you do, and if you don't, just stay quiet. I just want to know.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Just like even taking out of this group, right? We just have, not just, but okay, we have one yes.
We have a yes. We have a bilingual, but not a cert.
We have those. So I guess because we do have people like Madeline that do speak another language but have not took a certification. She's also very important SLP because she still speaks the language. She still can ask those questions to a parent, right? So she's definitely have a better luck with those bilingual students, especially of the language that she speaks. But maybe that percentage was taken out of those who are certified. That's why it's so low. And just taking a sample out of the people who present, who are here to present today, we see how it could totally be a representative of the nation as well. But I don't know how recent, so I don't want you guys to quote me, but it seems like, and what I read is that 4% out of that 6 are the Spanish bilingual SLPs. So then it only leaves 2% of everyone else, right? So that I'll be in that 2%.
Well, I think getting into dynamic assessment is really important, because here we are, for us to really have the tools to know that, okay, I'm a monolingual speaker. What do I need to do? Of course, I'm going to try, and first thing is to get a native speaker. What else can I do?
Right. So when we really look at dynamics assessment, honestly, there is no such thing as like a nice chart that tells you this is what dynamic assessment is. So it's a good thing and a bad thing. So a bad thing because we love charts, we love people just tell us this is what you need to do. But unfortunately, this is not how things work within the school system, especially. So that's kind of like the good thing that comes out of it. It's going to be up to you. How would you like to gather the information together? And you could do that by probing different things. And so, for example, although I did not speak English when I started, I was obviously very good at gesturally. I could point to things I can communicate with my face if I'm hurt or if I need to go somewhere with point to the paper, kind of like letting you guys know, like, okay, like, how do I get here, even though I don't really say that sentence, right? So you see that there is obviously cognition, there's a lot of processing that's happening. So little things like that would really, go a long way. Communicating, a lot of these kids who come in who are bilingual or learning a second language, most likely they will have some sort of ELL or ESL. That's where it used to be. I think it's right? ELL, English language learners. They'll have a teacher, ELL teacher. So this is a perfect person to have a little bit of communication just to see how they're doing in that class. Are they picking up the new vocabulary? How fast are they learning the new vocabulary? So you can, break down the tasks and those components, right? So when we're looking at language, we want to make sure that as the child understands us what we are saying. And as Caroline said, I work for special education. So I work with kids who are autistic and also bilingual. I work with kids who are Down syndrome, who are also bilingual. I work with very, severely and medically complex population who are also bilingual, right? So how do we do all this together, right? So if you don't work with that type of population, for example, then you really have to look at those deep understanding. If the child is able to imitate you, you could do non-word imitation, or even maybe possibly a word imitation. Just teach, right? So just teach a few words and see how quickly the child is able to grasp that, right? And that will give you an indication of if it's true a language disorder or it's just student is just learning. So for example, well, how many trials does it need? Not many, actually, not many, right? If you show me an apple and you tell me apple, 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 can you show me an apple out of 4 different items? I probably will point to an apple because, I hear you. Maybe I'm not going to retain that word tomorrow, but you just said apple 4 times and you told me to identify an apple in the field of 4. I think I'm going to be able to do it if I'm functionally in a typical way, right? And those questions, when you ask the parents, it's really important to say, like, do you think your child has any issues? Does your child able to follow directions? Is your child able to, when they speak in your language, are they making any errors, right? But even with that, like, if I'm gonna pick few words for the child to imitate, if the child is able to imitate me, and I'm gonna pick maybe just if it's just a sound. Now, it may not be in the child's repertoire of sounds. For example, in my language, there was no and the sounds, right? The TH and the sound. So that's probably would be very difficult for me to produce. But other sounds I'll probably be able to imitate after you. So just kind of doing a quick assessment like that will give you a little bit of time. And I think that I read a study that says that if a child attends the school and learns English, just kind of thrown into school, and has at least 30% of his education done in English, by about 1 year, you'll know 100% if the child is able to function. It really doesn't take that long. The kids really
say that again.
Yeah, it's just in 1 year. It takes about 1 year for them to just pick up, right? And we talked about the BICS, right? That simple back and forth. And once we have that back and forth, we could really see how fast they get in this, right? And then talking about the standardized test, which I think is really important in regards to assessment, right? We talk about the dynamic assessment, which is kind of like pulling different things and making your own tasks. I use a lot of standardized portions of standardized tests as my tools. I think it's important, and I think this is one of the big things I want to make sure that SLPs leave here with is just don't record the scores. Just don't compare them to the sample of kids that have nothing to do with this kid. Use it. Please use it, the pictures. If they don't know the pictures, teach them the pictures. Use it to your advantage. Tests are not bad. It's bad when you compare them to people that you shouldn't compare them. That's bad, in my opinion. And I think it's unethical. So, and I don't do that within my kids, whether they're autistic or just bilingual. I think it's just that. I just want to know how you are doing today and how you are doing in 3 months. And that to me is important. But how you do on the test on PLS 5, CEL 4, I really don't care. And I advocate so much for that. And I hope those who tend to do this tests, because they are pushed in schools, and I get it, you can stand up. You can stand up for yourself. And I had to do that within my work environment, not this school particularly. I worked in a different place where they just forced me to do PLS 5 on all the kids that I served. And I just said, I will not do it. I will give you the score. I'll give you the delay, the percentage of delay. I will no longer give you the scores of the PLS 5 or CEL 4. I just refuse. I will not do it. It does take a lot of work. So that's another big component and a roadblock is that to do all this, to be this amazing SLP, right? To do everything right, to get an interpreter, to do all these questions, to dig so deep, then make your own assessments. Who has time for this? Like, who has time for this? And those are real questions that we really need to answer. With the caseloads of, I don't even know anymore. I feel like they're just getting bigger and bigger every year. Like, how are we expected, and ethically we want to do that, but then where were we going to have time to do all that? And that's for one kid. What happens if you happen to have 3 kids bilingual in caseload? They all deserve that, but again, so I understand. So that's why I wanted to say, like, I took 5 last year. Okay, like, I don't know. I don't know how you're going to do that. So I understand, and I think you just have to do your best. And, why hospital medical with English standardized tests. So the reason why they do standardized tests is because it's easy assessment tool to get services, right? So if I'm going to say that this child has a delay, whatever, moderate delay, right? They get services very quickly, and it's just easy process, whether it's early intervention or it's within the schools, and that's why we do that. However, we have to be really careful because those kids that we're talking about may not be language delayed, and we are diagnosing them as language delayed because they are still learning English and they couldn't find whatever they need to be, whatever you said they need to find on the test, right? So we have to be very, 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 very careful. And then what happens is that, now you put in a child into services where they don't belong. It's just, yeah.
We're infringing on their civil rights. We cannot, it's unethical to do that. I wanted to point out, Ardell, they work in a high school, and it was indicated that they were talking about CALP and how that students, in order to really to reach that level of proficiency, they really need to be reading and readers. And she just kind of wanted to make sure that to bring that out there, that what about the willingness of students how that the willingness to read go hand in hand with building that proficiency?
Sure. I mean, there's so many factors, right? On top of the fact that we're talking about bilingualism, right? And just a person who's learning a second language, but just personal values. Like, I don't want to do it, right? Like, or whatever other factors, like we talked about the divorce and things that may happen in their home and all these other factors. And that's why there's no such thing as a book where you take a book and you just go chapter by chapter assessing these kids. There's just nothing like this can exist because of all these different factors that is affecting each individual child, just a child, period. And then when you add the bilingualism, that's when it really gets messy, right? So yeah, I agree. I mean, and I guess like you just do your best, like, right? And you can document everything, all the efforts that you provided. And if you seem like, if I understood the question correctly, if you feel like the child is not motivated to learn or not motivated to read or to learn to read, there's you do your best. You do your best, and that happens too, right? Especially in high school population where it's different personalities now, right? We don't have those little kiddies that we could just ride with cars and little bubbles or whatever we use. Some may not want to participate or may not feel like they need that, right? But it's tough for sure. I know I didn't report the standardized score when using standardized assessments for EL students. Do you report age equivalence? So sometimes, so again, it's when I assess the students of who speak Russian, and that's the language that I'm bilingually certified. I could definitely do that. I think it's hard to report age equivalent because age equivalent for for a kid who's just a year in the country, like what is going to be the age equivalent of his English? So it's a tough. I think the best way to really go about it is to be as descriptive as possible and really point out. It should be noted that the child has just came to the country half a year ago. The child is still learning English, adjusting to the new culture, and assessment is ongoing. And I used a parent report who said the child does well in his own language. I visited the classroom. He sits, participates, tries his best, tries to copy something from the board, and so forth. But I do know it does get tricky. So and sometimes, like I said, sometimes it is pushed by whether the school to report. So I get it. And I don't know what the true answer to that also, because I don't want to say, hey, don't report anything and then let the school get call me. But yes, you could definitely advocate. And I think the best thing to do is to just get those resources from ASHA and from the article that I told you to get. And I think using that as your resources to present that to administration sometimes would be a good way to start this conversation. It's like, hey, how can we better serve our bilingual students? Because I don't think this is the right way to do it.
Yeah, which leads into this really tough question that's being asked.
Yeah.
And it's if you get a student on your caseload who is language delayed in their first language, but also do not speak English, and they qualify for services because they have a delay in their first language. How do you service them when you don't speak that language?
Beautiful question. And I love that question. And I think it's such an important question. And the answer to that question is you service them in English because the research shows that when they have a delay in their own language, when they have a diagnosis, because we have a lot of kids come with a diagnosis already, it is highly, highly correlated with the language delay in the new language that they're learning. And I'm going to give a really good example to that. I'm from Ukraine originally. As you guys know, Ukraine is not doing well right now. There's war, and a lot of students immigrating into US and other countries of the world. I'm very lucky, and I feel like I've never felt like I'm at the right place at the right time. Having 3 new students added to our school who just recently came from Ukraine. So on top of the fact they have a diagnosis, 2 of them are autistic and 1 has a multiple disability, a student with multiple disabilities. And obviously they're in my school, and of course I'm going to pick them up on my caseload. They cannot be any other way. So, and here we are, right? And I know that I'm talking because I speak that language, but the reason I want to use these examples to show you how fast they learn the language. So this child who has multiple disabilities, his expressive language is higher than his cognitive skills. So he will just talk, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, and he'll go on tangents, but he's like socially so sometimes gets it like right. So right, like when I see him, he's like, "Hi, how are you?" And I'm like, "I'm great." And then he just goes 24, 24, 45, 65, and he just goes off tangents, counting or whatever he wants to do. Right. So that was his skills before he started learning English. And then he came to our school, and of course, like the teacher speaks English. A lot of staff members only speak English. Right. And guess what happened? So this has been a year. He came, I think, in November. So it's been almost a year in the school. Same thing happens in English. Expressive skills just skyrocketed. He could just talk in sentences, no problem, but cognitive skills still struggles. So it's directly proportional to the same thing. And I think what's another important thing that leads from this conversation into another is like, do we recommend those kids, especially who are delayed, to stop one language, just stop the whole language? Let's just bombard him with English because he's in the United States now, like that's what his life is. And what do you think the answer to that? I mean, I think you guys kind of got it for me what the answer is, but let's have some participation here. What do you guys think? Should we recommend to stop the home language in home? Should we encourage the parents to speak English with their kids if they're delayed already.
That's right. Shelby, Jocelyn, Megan, Heidi, Kelly, everybody, Abby, Lynn, I can't get you all. Everyone's like, no, I think this is outrage. It's happening right now. We love everybody that's listening.
And here's the shocker. I still, in my school, still have teachers who would recommend this during the IEP. And unfortunately, and I don't want any teacher to be in that situation, but unfortunately, I have to just interrupt the teacher right smack in the middle of this sentence. And I was like, actually, the research shows the opposite. Please continue. There's really no reason for you, a parent who just immigrated to this country, or just six months or a year, still learning herself, for you to start being this bad English model for this child. And then also just imagine internally what you have to feel, right? Like I have to just completely, I just feel the answer to that is please do not tell parents to stop their home language, and encourage the teachers that you work with to make sure that they don't recommend this to the parents, because especially for those nonverbal kids, and they feel like the best word I love is, are they confused? Are they confused? They're not confused. They are not confused. My Down syndrome kids who speak both languages, they are not confused. They just have Down syndrome. They have language delays. They have cognitive delays. That's what is the issue. It's not the two languages that's the issue. The two languages actually allows the brain to grow and have more synapses and areas that activated in their brain because they're bilingual. So please, that's like another big thing that I want you to leave here with. Don't score them and compare them to other kids. And please do not tell parents to stop their home language. That
I want to make sure I heard that, and everybody in the back heard it. Do not, do not judge them, rate them along with non-native speakers of right. And yes, and please continue to encourage the home language. I know we've talked a lot, but do you want to touch on treatment progress dismissal for the time we've got left? I know that we're going to want you back on because you've got so much wonderful information for us.
I really appreciate it. And I'm having fun with you, and I love all the comments, and I love all the participants. It's really like a big live event, even though I don't see you guys. I definitely feel the energy in the chat room. So I guess as we go into the dynamic assessment, and dynamic assessment is always test, teach, retest. So that retest becomes your progress. That retest becomes something that you track, right? And then sometimes those kids may still end up, even if they are just learning English, that's okay. Give them a year, see how they're doing. And if you see they're picking up English and they're moving, they're understanding, they are, they may obviously still have some grammatical issues, right? Languages sometimes follow different grammatical pattern. It took me a little while. I was omitting all the articles. I may still omit some articles. It's just a part of how I learned my language. My language does not have the articles. So I don't feel the need to put them, right? So the boy is this. I just say boy is this. Like to me, it feels natural. So the grammatical, so maybe on the test, I would score as that was grammatically incorrect. However, it's just I'm learning a new language. It's really difficult for me to learn. And again, depends on what age the child is learning. Of course, the younger kids will pick the language much faster. And I think the cutoff for accents, right? So people who have accents versus not, it's about 12 years of age. So if a child is exposed to second language, a sequential, right? He learned, for example, Spanish. At 4 years old, he came to the United States to start learning a new language. At 4 years old, he was most likely not going to have an accent as he grows up. If it's after 12 years old, there's nothing you could do. You are always going to carry a little bit of that accent, which I know that I carry. And it used to be such a burden to me, but I've learned to just accept it and love it. And what made me accept it and learn it and love it is those kids who come in to my school who speak my language and need my services so badly. And I was like, this is why I speak a second language, so I can help them so that they feel so supported and they don't feel like they are not fitting into this environment. So I've learned, but it's a process for everyone, right? It's a process on accepting yourself, accepting your mistakes. So yeah.
You want to, because we don't have too much time, but there's a couple of questions I want to ask you in a minute, but I want to get to dismissal before we run
Yes.
out of time, and then we'll go over a little bit because there are a few questions.
Yes. So dismissal, and I think as we talked about, is just having a team. Like, don't feel like you need to do this on your own. You talk to the teacher, you talk to the parent, you talk to ESL teacher, you look at everything that the child is doing. And if you feel that the child is just learning English, you could let them go. However, if you feel this child is still struggling, right, there's so many things that we can look at. We can look at attention, we could look at memory, we could look at things that are not linguistic per se. We could look at things like even you teaching a word that doesn't even exist in English, like how fast can they pick that word up, right? Like how fast are they learning the things that you are teaching them? And that's what's going to be the indication. Okay, I think they still may need help because you know what? I've read this passage and it's like a very small book and I've read it like 6 times, and this kid is still not getting the basic things that I'm trying to do. So they probably have a language delay. They probably need help even with their own language. And those are the conversations you keep having during IEPs, with parents, with teachers, and as a team decide that versus just put everything pressure on SLP. And I know the pressure goes on SLP because it's speech language services, but it shouldn't be a one-person decision, right? It's the teachers, what the teacher thinks, because the teachers having them the majority of the day. How are they doing there? Like, how are they doing in all their classes? How are they doing in math? Math is a great, great skill. I mean, we don't really think about it, but kids who are not language delayed, they're going to do pretty well in math. Some of the things that you don't need the word problem, especially like just like dividing or adding, or how are they doing on that? Because if they can problem solve there, I'm gonna say they're probably doing really good. So just looking at those little challenges in other areas that are not specifically linguistic, and then that's the article that I told you to really look in. It looks into that. It looks into non-word repetition tasks. It looks into other areas that are not linguistically based to really assess and see if the child is really struggling. Like if I'm just gonna say, hey, repeat after me, and just give them a sentence to repeat and see if they could just repeat the sentence, even though they may not know what that is, or even create a sentence that doesn't exist in English, even for yourself, just, and see if they can repeat that. So I think that's where that decision making comes, is you obviously need to spend a little bit of time with the student, and it's okay. And I'm going to say it's okay, because at the end of the day, sometimes as a monolingual SLP, it's hard to be in that, it's hard to be in that situation where you have to be the deciding factor, where you really have no tools to tackle that. You don't know. So, you really stuck in that. But if you spend a little bit of time with that child, you will know. You will know by how fast the child is learning, how is the child functioning in the classroom. You will know. You will get that information. So, and you will base it on that. And with your dynamics tasks that you keep giving, teaching, retesting. How is he doing now after I taught it? Still struggling. Okay, let's try it again. Still struggling. Okay, let's keep him on for a little bit.
And then on the flip side of that, if they are quickly picking it up, then we're talking dismissal. If you can show it, you might not be using that standardized test because it's not standardized to them. But if
And again, it's just like the assessment. It becomes tricky, but I feel like if you become a little bit more sensitive to understanding that sometimes they are getting them wrong because they just learn like the new language, I think that's where the key is. I think once you start seeing a child on a regular basis, you kind of get a feel like that they're okay. Like I just feel like once you start to know a kid and keep teaching and keep reading some books, providing the vocabulary, like they're getting it quickly, like they're getting it. They are attending, they are, their memory is good, right? Because I'm just learning a new language. I still can follow directions in my own language. I can still do a lot of things in my language. So I'm going to carry over those skills. So I'll be able to communicate with you in my other ways. So you're going to see that effort, right? So I think that's the that's how you decide at the end. But of course, any parent input is very valid in this point. And of course, the teachers' interview are very important on how they, like I said, like it has to be a team effort. There's no way you can do this on your own. It's not a shot.
Exactly. And I think that's one thing that SLPs, we need to advocate, that we aren't in this alone. We are a team. This is an IEP team. We are a team together, and we need to utilize our team as such.
Sure.
Shelby, I want to, what you wrote, this one is hitting me. So I want to stop us and just talk about this, Margaryta. She says that in her district, do you have any resources that supports a monolingual SLP providing therapy to a child that they don't speak their language? She has a couple of speech pathologists that refuse to work with those students and will only put them on consult. I know, that was my face too.
So New York City is very diverse. There's no way that you can just serve monolingual kids. It's just not going to happen. So in my district, in my school specifically, we have monolingual SLPs serving bilingual kids. The way that we address them in my school is that if that child speaks the language that I speak, I pick up. In case sometimes if there's just a newcomer, he doesn't speak my language, but I'm more sensitive because I have my bilingual extension, I'll pick them up. But if I'm full and there's a bilingual child, the SLP just picks up. There's no such thing. I know why this happens is because you guys have so many, especially in regular education, you have so many sessions that you can actually pick and choose, right? Like it's like, okay, I'm going to take these and these are going to be like on the side. Maybe that's why that happens as well, because you can choose and pick. I'm not sure, but I understand about resources. The resources that I'm giving you is for monolingual SLPs, right? That's specifically we made this podcast is for monolingual SLPs, because I think that the bilingual SLPs we know, like we got the schooling. I'm giving you resources for monolingual SLPs. So those are the resources, the ASHA resources for monolingual SLPs. The article that I shared, that's the resources for monolingual SLPs. That's the resources that you're going to use. That's the only thing that we have. The SLAM cards from Dr. Crowley, that's what you're going to use. The questions, the parents that you need to ask are all for monolingual SLPs. So those are at least a starting point. What they choose to do at the end, the SLPs, and how the school is run, unfortunately, is just not. It's something that I cannot answer. I have no idea. Different states, different districts run differently. That does not happen in my school.
Right. I don't think ethically that would hold water in court. Madeline, in her district, they use, I don't know if you call it CLIM or CLIM. They use that program to help determine language difference versus disorder. Have you heard of that program?
No, I haven't. I'm definitely gonna.
Yeah, and I want to also put another resource out there, bilinguistics. Have you heard of? Yeah, that is a resource that we use in my district.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Lynn asked articulation. So articulation is really hard, especially when you're just picking up, obviously, because you have no idea if the child has articulation issues in their language. The best way to go is ask a parent. Do you think your child has articulation issues, right? Does your child, and also be very careful on how you phrase this, because we could say articulation and the interpreter has no idea what you're talking about. So you can say, does your child produce the words correctly? Every word, does your child make mistakes when they produce certain words? So be sure that you kind of like tone it down a little bit with our vocabulary words. Instead of receptive skills used, does your child understand things when you tell your child to do something? Does your child knows how to identify items in the household and so forth? So articulation is a little hard when you start. However, as you are working with that child, you can definitely start probing for those phonemes and seeing if the child's right. You can probe for and for different phonemes in different positions. Just you can definitely probe and see how the child is doing, but just be careful. And there are so many articles about specific language. Like you could definitely just research like Chinese speakers' most common errors in English, and it will tell you what the errors will be, so you know that that's a more typical error for that child versus, oh, he has an articulation issue. I think that's also very important. And there's so much resources online for each specific language. I think you could definitely find something for the language that your student speaks. So use that always as a resource. But articulation is definitely hard in the beginning, but I think it could be okay later.
Great. I know that there's tons more to talk about. I think we would definitely need to bring you back. There's so many more questions. I think this is just such a relevant topic and a hot topic. But I think I want to just leave with saying, go to ASHA, go check out what they have, right? I gave the resource for that article that you provided us. Biolinguistics, take a look at their website. Clem, I'm
project.
and this is wonderful. Thank you. Everyone's saying thanks. I just want to thank you, Margaryta, for coming and sharing. This is such a personal topic for you, and you just bring your heart, and we are so thankful. I hate to say goodbye. This has been phenomenal. I have loved it. Everyone has been such great participants as well. This just shows me how much we need to do this again. Margaryta, thank you, thank you, thank you. Can't thank you enough.
Follow me on Instagram. If you don't mind, follow me on Instagram, Kuzmin SLP, Kuzmin SLP. I would love some new followers.
But I think it was a yes.
At gmail.com.
Say that again.
So please make sure KuzminSLP@gmail.com is my email. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you have specific cases, if you want me to just, again, guide you through some resources, if you're having a hard time. I would love to help out as much as I can, but I really appreciate this talk. I think we had so many good inputs and so many good questions, and it's a tough topic. So, and somebody posted like, this is just an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, and I agree. I agree. But I appreciate that so many has, came to this. I'm so glad that so many are interested in this topic, and that's what continues to push this topic, and that's what we need to do. So I'm just so thankful. Thank you so much.
All right, bye everyone. Bye.